All right, ready to dive in. We're tackling how to speak English better today.
Sounds good.
And, we've got this awesome article here, Want to Speak Better English. Start with these 5 lessons. It's really going to help us out, lay out a roadmap for everybody.
I like that, a roadmap. Straight to fluency.
Exactly.
Mm.
And, it's not about being perfect, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Nobody's perfect. It's all about feeling more confident, being able to have conversations, and just, express yourself.
It's about enjoying speaking English, not being afraid of it.
Yeah, totally. So this first lesson, it's all about mastering common phrases and expressions.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, the article basically says that, fluency isn't just about knowing a ton of words.
Right.
It's about understanding how native speakers actually use them, how they put them together in everyday speech.
I see. So it's like getting that natural flow sounding more authentic.
Exactly. It's like instead of just memorizing a dictionary, you're learning the secret code of how people actually talk.
Okay, I like that. Secret code. I'm in.
Right. And these common phrases, they're like the building blocks of conversation. Like instead of just saying hello, you could say, hey, what's up?
Or how's it going?
Yeah, or how's it going? Exactly. It just sounds more natural, more friendly.
And, when I was learning English, those little phrases really helped me feel more comfortable. Like I was really part of the conversation.
Oh, for sure. They make a huge difference. The article even gave some examples like instead of just saying, please wait, you could say, hold your horses.
Hold your horses. That's a good one.
Right. It just adds a little bit of personality, a little bit of fun.
And you know what? It shows that you're not just speaking English, you're understanding the culture behind it.
Yeah, it's like you're getting those nuances, the little things that make a language come alive.
Totally. So how do we actually master these phrases?
Well, the article says start small, you know. Don't try to learn everything at once.
Right. Baby steps.
Yeah, focus on those everyday phrases you use all the time, like greetings, requests, opinions, and then just practice, practice, practice.
Repetition is key, for sure. And there are some cool apps out there that can help with that, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. They're like having a conversation partner in your pocket. And what I love about this approach is it trains your brain to think in phrases rather than individual words.
Oh, that makes sense. So instead of translating word for word in your head, you're starting to think in English chunks.
Exactly. It's like learning to play a song on the piano. You don't focus on each individual note. You learn the chords and the flow.
Ah, so it's about capturing the rhythm and melody of the language.
You got it. And once you start thinking in phrases, your speech just flows more naturally and you'll sound so much more confident.
Okay, I'm convinced. So we got our phrases down. What's next on our roadmap to speaking better English?
Well, next up is pronunciation. And this is where things get really interesting.
Ooh, pronunciation. That's a big one.
It is. The article makes a really good point. Even if you have perfect grammar, if your pronunciation is off, people might have trouble understanding you.
Yeah, it's like having all the right words but jumbling them up in the wrong order.
Exactly. So the article suggests tackling this head on by mimicking native speakers, like watch movies, listen to podcasts, really pay attention to how those sounds are made.
Makes sense. It's like training your ear to hear the subtleties of English pronunciation.
Yeah, and you're also picking up on things like intonation and stress, how native speakers emphasize certain words or phrases.
Oh, intonation. That's tricky. Like how your voice goes up and down can totally change the meaning of a sentence, right?
Right. It's like a secret language within the language.
Yeah.
They gave this crazy example in the article. I didn't say he stole the money.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Depending on which word you emphasize, you could be implying a whole different story. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And it shows how important it is to not just hear the words, but to really listen, to understand the context and the nuances.
Which, brings us to lesson 3, active listening.
Okay, now we're talking. But you know what? Before we dive into that, I think our listeners could use a little break to process all this pronunciation. Goodness, what do you think?
I agree. Let's give them a moment to let it all sink in. We'll be right back.
Back in a flash.
Okay, so we're back and ready to talk about listening. It's not just about phrases and pronunciation. It's also about, really understanding what you hear.
Exactly. It's like the other side of the speaking coin, right? You can't have one without the other.
Totally. And the article calls this active listening. It's about, not just hearing the words, but getting the whole picture.
Right. Like the context, the tone of voice, even like body language if you're talking to someone in person.
Yeah, all those little cues that give you more information.
And let's face it, sometimes English conversations can be a bit tricky.
Oh, absolutely.
People talk fast, they use slang, there are all these idioms and expressions.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And that's why active listening is so important. It helps you decode all those nuances and really understand what's being said.
So how do we become better active listeners? Any tips from the article?
Oh, yeah, tons. One that I really like is, immerse yourself in English as much as possible.
Okay, so like podcasts, music, movies.
Exactly. And even things like the news or audiobooks.
So you're constantly hearing English being spoken naturally.
Right. It's like training your ears to pick up on different accents, different ways of speaking.
And the article also mentioned this technique called shadowing. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah. Shadowing is awesome.
So what is it exactly?
Basically, you listen to a native speaker and try to repeat what they're saying almost at the same time.
So you're like mimicking them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're trying to copy their pronunciation, their intonation, their rhythm.
Does it feel weird at first?
It can be a little strange, yeah.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's super effective.
So you're basically training your brain to produce those sounds naturally.
Exactly. It's like you're stepping into the shoes of a native speaker.
Yeah.
And the more you practice, the more natural it starts to feel.
Okay. I'm going to have to try that one. So we've talked about active listening, but what about vocabulary?
Vocabulary.
Yeah.
The article had some really interesting points about that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, myself included, get caught up in trying to learn as many words as possible.
It's tempting, right? But the article says it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means focus on learning the words that are actually useful for you. Think about the topics you talk about most, your hobbies, your work.
So like tailor your vocabulary to your needs.
Exactly. That way, you're not just memorizing random words, you're building a vocabulary that you can actually use in conversations.
And the article also talks about the importance of learning words in context.
Oh, that's so key. It's like, instead of just memorizing a definition, you're seeing how the word is actually used in a sentence, in a real-life situation.
It gives it more meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it helps you remember it better, too. They gave this great example with the word happy, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
Like, there are so many synonyms for happy, joyful, cheerful, delighted, thrilled.
But they all have slightly different meanings.
Right. And by learning those words in context, you can start to understand those subtle differences and use them more accurately.
It's about painting a richer picture with your language.
Exactly. And you know what else the article suggested? Learning phrases instead of single words.
Oh, yeah, like those building blocks we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's like having pre-made chunks of language that you can easily plug into your conversations.
It takes the pressure off having to construct every sentence from scratch.
And don't forget about tools like flashcards and spaced repetition apps.
Oh, those are lifesavers.
Seriously. They help you review and reinforce what you've learned so you don't forget it.
And you know what? I think that leads us perfectly into the final lesson. Practice speaking consistently.
Yes, the most important one. It's like we can learn all the phrases and vocabulary in the world, but if we don't actually use them, what's the point?
Right. It's all about putting that knowledge into action.
And the article made this great analogy. It's like learning to play the piano. You can't just read about music theory. You have to actually sit down and practice.
You got to get those fingers moving.
Exactly. And the same goes for speaking English. The more you practice, the more fluent you'll become.
And the more confident you'll feel, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, speaking of confidence, the article had some really good tips on how to overcome the fear of making mistakes.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people struggle with.
I know I did. But the truth is, everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the learning process.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you get the hang of it.
Exactly. And each mistake is a learning opportunity. And the article had some great suggestions for finding people to practice with.
Oh, yeah, like those language exchange apps. They're awesome.
They are. But honestly, even just talking to yourself in English can be helpful.
Seriously, like talking to the mirror.
Sure, why not? Or just narrate your day, describe what you're doing, have a conversation with your pet.
It sounds a little crazy, but I guess it makes sense.
It does. It gets you comfortable with the sounds of English, with forming sentences, with expressing yourself.
And it takes the pressure off because you're not worried about being judged.
Exactly. And, the article also emphasized the importance of setting small goals.
So, like, don't try to become fluent overnight.
Right. Just focus on making small improvements each day. Maybe try using a new phrase in a conversation or learn a few new words.
It's those baby steps that eventually lead to fluency.
And don't forget to celebrate those little wins. Every time you have a successful conversation or understand something you didn't before, give yourself a pat on the back.
Those little victories keep you motivated.
Exactly. And I think that brings us to the heart of it all. It's not just about reaching some arbitrary level of fluency.
It's about the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about enjoying the process of learning, of discovering new things about the language and about yourselves.
And it's about connecting with people, sharing ideas, experiencing different cultures.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we should all keep in mind as we continue on our English-speaking journeys.
So true. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that speaking better English is within everyone's reach. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn, to practice, and most importantly, to have fun with it.
I love that. It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And the more you enjoy the journey, the more successful you'll be. So to all our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep having fun with English.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, happy learning, everyone. We'll see you next time. The common thread. What ties it all together? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's all about confidence, isn't it?
Confidence. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Every lesson, every tip we've talked about, it all comes back to helping you feel more confident speaking English.
So it's not just about the mechanics of the language.
Right. It's about breaking down those mental barriers, those fears and insecurities that hold so many people back.
Because I think a lot of English learners get stuck in their heads.
Oh, absolutely.
hmm
They worry about making mistakes or sounding silly.
And that can really stop you from progressing.
Exactly. But the truth is, the more you speak, the more confident you become.
It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Right. And the article had some good advice on how to build that confidence.
Like what?
Well, things like finding your own learning style, setting realistic goals, and, remembering to celebrate your successes.
Because it's easy to get discouraged.
It is. But every little step forward is a victory.
And it's important to remember that everyone learns at their own pace.
Absolutely. There's no right or wrong way to learn a language. The important thing is to find what works for you and stick with it.
And I think that's a really empowering message.
It is. It's like the article is saying, hey, you've got this. We're here to support you, but ultimately it's up to you to take that leap of faith and start speaking.
And don't be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Oh, definitely. Find a language partner, join a group class, even just chat with friends or family who speak English.
The more you surround yourself with the language, the faster you'll learn.
And the more fun you'll have. Because let's be honest, learning English shouldn't feel like a chore.
No, it should be enjoyable.
Exactly. So find ways to make it fun for yourself. Watch movies, listen to music, read books, whatever interests you.
And don't forget about those little motivational tricks.
Oh, yeah, those are important. Like setting rewards for yourself, reminding yourself why you started learning English in the first place.
And one of my favorite tips from the article was keeping a language journal.
Oh, that's a good one. I used to do that when I was learning Spanish.
It really helps you track your progress, see how far you've come.
And it's a great way to reflect on your learning journey, the challenges you've overcome and the things you're proud of.
Because sometimes it's easy to forget how much you've actually learned.
It is. But when you look back at your journal, you can see those small victories, those moments of growth and improvement.
And that can be really motivating, especially when you're feeling stuck.
Absolutely. So remember, the journey to speaking better English is just that, a journey. There will be ups and downs, moments of frustration, and moments of triumph.
But the important thing is to keep going.
Exactly. Don't give up on yourself. Keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep having fun.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Connecting with people, sharing experiences, and expanding your world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners out there, keep up the great work. You're doing amazing.
We're cheering you on every step of the way. And on that note, happy learning, everyone.